That's one of the reasons we continue to hold on to the shame, is because we're told we're crazy after we survive it.
What did trauma look like in your life?
An anxiety so hard, so turned up, and so deep that it felt like a limb. I was animalized, just unbelievable living conditions. What's a word for shame times 1,000?
Right.
This occurred to thousands of kids on 4 continents over 40 years.
Jamie Mustard is a conceptual artist,
futurist, and writer whose work explores perception in the physical world.
Through his books, he examines how attention,
meaning, and visibility shape the way ideas and people stand out.
I overcame something that I shouldn't have been able to overcome, and that has its own feelings to it, almost like surviving a war. And so the reason I wrote Child X is I want people to know that you can be in the darkest reaches of impossibility to come back and still come back. They ask me, okay, well, why would somebody animalize a child like that if they're trying to build a religious movement? And the answer is that
Every day, you are making your brain better, or you are making it worse. Stay with us to learn how you can change your brain for the better every day. Hi, I'm Dr. Daniel Amen. I've experienced firsthand the powerful impact that proper supplementation can have on your brain, your body, and your mind. That's why I founded BrainMD. Our formulas are scientifically created from decades of clinical research designed to help you think clearer, feel better, and improve every aspect of your health. Whether it's Brain and Body Power Max, the same formula I used in the world's largest study of NFL players to optimize brain performance, to Happy Saffron to boost mood and memory, and Pro Brain Biotics Max to improve the gut-brain connection. BrainMD delivers the highest quality, science-backed solutions to help you think and feel better. Tana and I take many of our products every day. And as a special offer, just for our listeners, you can save 20% on your next order. Visit brainmd.com and use the code podcast20. With a better brain, always comes a better life.
Welcome. We are so excited today to welcome such an interesting and fun guest. Jamie Mustard is a conceptual artist, artistic director, culturist, and award-winning writer, including his work on art, imagery, and the messaging of ideas, as well as his work on human perception in the digital world. Jamie has worked in fine art, music, film, and design. He produced the documentary Showbiz Is My Life, which was screened by Lincoln Center as one of the best films of the year upon its year of release. His literary memoir, Child X, about being handed over at birth to a dark movement, was released at the end of July 2025 to critical acclaim. His graphic novel, Hybrid, set in a future-adjacent sci-fi alternate reality Los Angeles of his youth, will be published in the late fall of 2025. His second graphic novel, War Poems, a sci-fi episodic work exploring the darkest reaches of humanity, will be published in April 2026. Growing up in severe poverty, illiteracy, abandonment, and neglect in inner-city Los Angeles, unable to write or even use a comma at age 20, he overcame obstacles to eventually graduate from the London School of Economics. Wow. Welcome, Jamie. That is so exciting.
thank you for having me.
You have accomplished a lot from where you started.
I have. I mean, it seems like quite a journey.
Yes.
Yeah. In fact, I was in Yerevan, Armenia. I've been on the road for 2 weeks. 4 days ago, presenting on brain health and mental wellness, or the remediation of trauma through brain health and nervous system remediation.
Interesting.
Yeah. So from where I started to where I've been, it's sometimes I'm sitting there going, what am I doing here?
Well, can you take us through where you started?
I can.
Well, let me just jump in, because you and I met through Dr. Faber, who is in our Encino clinic, and we were working on your interest in stellate ganglion block, which is a treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder. And Dr. Faber, Jay, called me up and it's like, Daniel, you have to meet Jamie. He's amazing. He also wrote the book, The Iconist, which was a huge award-winning book. And so this is going to be a very interesting conversation. And
Different.
Let's start. I think, tell us your story.
Okay.
And then we'll get into some of the healing aspects of it.
Okay. So upon the day of my birth in the 1970s, I won't date myself. Literally on the day of my birth, my parents turned me over to a religious paramilitary organization in a slum on the outskirts of downtown Los Angeles, not far from MacArthur Park. People know what that is. And Rampart Police Station, where I was raised in a kind of orphanage or kind of a place where they sent all the babies so the parents could work. So there might have been one or two caretakers in a tenement with 30 to 40 babies, where I didn't receive really human touch for the first 2.5 years of my life. We were bathed once a week I've had caretakers reach out to me since I started speaking out in the last 2.5 years. Just unbelievable living conditions. So a part of my life has been kind of a mystery as to why and how I became me when I've lost so many of my friends to drug addiction, suicide. Yeah.
So how did that happen?
How did I do it?
How did you do that?
Gosh.
But describe more.
Yeah, tell us more. I have so many questions.
Okay. So
we're talking about Scientology.
We are talking about Scientology.
Can we say that?
The name that shall not be named. At 3 years old, when I was older, I went to a building on Melrose and Van Ness, which was probably the worst of it. Just an 3 bunks high military structure. I didn't ever learn to brush my teeth. I was animalized. I didn't have underwear. I did not go to school. So I pretty much didn't go to school.
Did they homeschool you?
No, there was no education. A few years later, there was a kind of mock effort at education, but no, there was.
So you just sort of slipped through the cracks, like.
The idea is a lot of people, since I've started talking about it and the memoir came out, they ask me, okay, well, why would somebody animalize a child like that if they're trying to build a religious movement? And the answer is that the movement is very much built on labor, and you're keeping your parents busy, and you're not really valuable until you're a vessel, until you can work for them at 10 or 12 years old. I probably started having child labor at 9. You have to look at it like, this is graphic, but say I had a baby piglet. That piglet's not very valuable to me. But if I put it into the minimum environment of a pig pen and I grow it for 5 years till it's slaughterable, then it can be very valuable to me. So they were basically putting all of us kids into this environment where we're basically being penned or warehoused with the minimum amount of resources until we would be able to work. I signed my first. They make you sign a 1 billion-year contract. I signed my first 1 billion-year contract with an X at 5 years old. So
hence Child X?
That's part of it. The concept of Child X is to have your life predetermined for you before you're even born.
So you don't really have...
What do you mean by that?
You don't have any agency is what I'm...
Yeah, you don't have any agency. You are, and you're being filled with all sorts of ideas. One of the incredible ideas that you're hit with at a very young age. This is after not receiving touch and so many, and just the stress of being, it was like a highly aggressive, a more aggressive version. Maybe this is hard to believe, but a very, a pressure cooker environment, kind of like Lord of the Flies. We ate slop. It's too hard to believe. And it's one of the reasons up until 2.5 years ago, I was living in complete shame. I shared it with no one. I was trying to pretend it never happened. No one knew. None of my publishers knew. My agents didn't know.
This is like trafficking. This sounds like human trafficking. How did this? How is this not exposed? Are they still doing this?
They're not doing it so much to young kids anymore. They banned kids in the late 80s because of what was happening to us. The human trafficking laws that would have maybe saved my life or saved so many of my friends' lives didn't go into effect until 2003. So yeah, it's wild, but it happened. And one of the reasons I finally decided to write this book is because this occurred it's really the inner core, what they call the Sea Organization. This is the paramilitary wing that runs Scientology. We had the worst of it. And this occurred to thousands of kids on 4 continents over 40 years. So Johannesburg, South Africa, Southern England, Central Florida, Sydney, Australia, Mexico City. So because of the shame, a lot of them didn't, I wanted to speak up for them.
Well, and plus they've been raised in this, so they don't, it's like they're, I would assume, brainwashed.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Maybe this is too much. Were many of these kids sexually abused?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the, few things that didn't happen to me. I don't know. I think that might have put me over, but there was one kid that I was really close to when I was 5 in this building on Melrose, which was the worst of it in terms of the way the treatment of the nannies. I was on a 3rd bunk at 3 years old with just fighting for my survival. And there was a kid there that was a close friend of mine at 5 years old. He was sexually abused there. Later, he became a sexual abuser and was it had the longing to do it, had a wife and child, and decided that the honorable thing to do would be to take his own life so that he would not do that. And so the amount of kids that I have lost, that I grew up with, that I have lost to extreme alcohol abuse and drugs, is they're not here to speak for themselves. And so it's one of the reasons I finally decided that I had to put the shame aside, which I have carried because, I was a baby. The day I was born. I say that to people and I think, well, when you were 3 months, no, on the day of my birth. And I'll give you one example. A caretaker reached out to me when I first started talking 2 years ago. And she said, do you remember how they used to bathe you on 811 Beacon Street in downtown LA, or on the outskirts of downtown LA, near Rampart Police Station? And I said, no. And she said, they would fill the tub with water. There'd be 30 or more babies. They would have 2 caretakers or nannies. One would be putting the diaper on. So they would dip us in the water. They do this once a week. This was our only bathing. Wipe us down and then hand us to the other person that would put a diaper on us. They wouldn't change the water. And that was for the first 2.5 years of my life. So that I didn't know about. That was somebody that was a 7-year-old girl that was assigned to take care of me, telling me that story. But harrowing and extreme. And I'm kind of going, how graphic should I be on this podcast?
No, you can be as graphic as you want.
But let's talk about the way out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, did you get pushback when you started telling the story? That's another question I have.
Well, but let's, before we get there, I want to finish the story. So you're not going to school, but you do have friends, right? You said somebody you were close to.
I had a place when I was 19. We had 2 years off where my mother had a physical condition. We moved to Oregon. And I don't think if hadn't had that 2-year break, I was in school, but I didn't have glasses. And at that point I was illiterate other than being able to read because I had to study the doctrine. If I hadn't had that break, I don't know that I would have survived it. Went back when I was 16 because I was illiterate. My only choices in life were I was impoverished by my illiteracy. I was going to do manual labor or go work for them. So I went to work for them. And then finally it got to a point where I felt like a slave and I escaped, literally a harrowing escape at 19 years old. I had a relative that said, you can come stay at my house. If you're in school, beauty school, plumbing school, trade school, I don't care. As long as long as you're working on your literacy, rent, health insurance, use of a car. It was the only one place I had to go. I went there and I said, I'm going to try.
So how did you find family members?
Once every 2 years or so, we would go see relatives. We would get it, and which was miserable because I would go and there would be all this love bestowed upon me, and then all I would be thinking about is I have to go back in 2 weeks. And then there was cases of severe cases of medical neglect.
I bet.
One of the first times I went, maybe the second time I went when I was 4, my grandmother put me in the tub and all smiling and happy, giving me ginger snaps and milk and honey. And she looked down in the tub and she grimaced and screamed. And I was rushed to the emergency room. And I had such a bad infection to my lower extremities that they thought I would go septic and I could be in serious trouble. So there was rushed to the emergency room. So medical neglect is a huge part of my story. 2 years later, I almost lost my hearing had we not been on a trip to visit my grandmother. We saw a doctor friend of hers in a neighboring town, again, rushed to Manhattan, went into surgery that night, and they didn't know if they were going to be able to save my hearing.
Did you ever find out why your parents turned you over to these people?
I mean, I think it was that time in the 60s and 70s when everybody was joining these movements. There were thousands of them.
So your parents joined it?
My mother joined the paramilitary wing, or the kind of naval wing of Scientology, and worked as one of its counselors. Yeah. So it's yeah.
So at 19, you go live with a relative.
Yeah.
And then what happens?
I start doing remedial classes at Westchester Community College in New York. Just remedial to learn how to write, because I could not write a sentence, not a paragraph. It's hard to believe, but it really, it was one of the, at one point, my grandmother, when I was 16, had said, "Hey, come here and work on your illiteracy." I was so numb. I just wanted to get back to LA and see my friends. And I couldn't do it. But at 19, I was so desperate. I escaped in a very harrowing escape in Central Florida. Switched cabs 4 times, had to do a whole ruse to kind of get off the property, and then, got into a hotel room because I'd been swirling money away. Called my grandmother and said, "Does the offer still stand?"
And it sounds like they moved you around, because I've heard you say like different cities, like you were in Central Florida.
Yeah, I was in Central Florida. I was in Southern England when I got older. I was in Copenhagen, Denmark. I was in Canada. And so again, this is the way we were treated. If you go to Sydney, the living conditions were the same. You go to Southern England, the living conditions were the same. Probably the first generation ahead of me to start to receive this treatment was Neil Gaiman. He was, his father, who I met in, a couple of times, was the national spokesperson, a very close confidant to Hubbard, and even the head of Scientology's secret police. And yes, Scientology has a kind of intelligence wing. And in fact, at 7 years old, this story is just so crazy, and it's hard for me to own it because it was just happening to me. I was a twig going down a river. But when I was 7 years old, the FBI raided the Scientology, that big blue building in Hollywood. And I was woken up, in the middle of the night. And it was the biggest, and I described this in the book. It was the largest FBI raid in US history at the time, maybe to this day. And because this Scientology was conducting the largest domestic spying campaign in US history on the federal government.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that was, they kept us up all night as the FBI agents were kind of, pouring into the different rooms, moving us around the big building. And what was so wild about that, and why I bring it up, is when it was over, we went back to the FBI was unconcerned with us and our conditions.
Yeah, like I'm thinking to myself,
so
because I'm also a child psychiatrist. So I'm thinking, why is your grandmother not reporting this abuse? Why is the FBI not reporting?
How is this place not busted?
Because this is neglect and abuse. And it's like, why is the system allowed to continue?
I think it was the late 70s and 80s. Seatbelt laws were new. I think it was the time was part of it.
I don't know. I started medical school in 1978. I went, this child's being neglected and abused. So I'm not. I'm not sure it's the.
It's a really good conversation. The answer to that is really important because it's probably goes to me asking you.
Like
how did I get here?
How did it happen?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, I'm really curious.
Part of the answer to that is a major part of the indoctrination at least is the removal of, and I explain this in the book, the systematic removal of emotion and empathy. When you're 4 years old or 5 years old and you hurt yourself, a caretaker or what they called a nanny would run over and say, knock off the H&R, which means human emotion reaction.
Oh.
Yeah. So human emotion reaction is me kind of dramatizing or acting out one of my past lives. It was frowned upon. So we weren't even allowed to be children. And I think that there's certain drills or training that you do within Scientology that dampens empathy, very systematically dampens empathy in a powerful way. And I think that's one of the reasons that there's a lot of adults watching us go on and they did nothing, because I think their empathy had been removed.
So, and it was about control.
Yeah. And also, I think it's very interesting. They woke me up at midnight in this slum across the street from the Big Blue building, and they brought us into the main building where they kept us up all night. And I think part of that has to do with
they didn't see they
didn't want to see us in those conditions. Yeah. I mean, I'm speculating.
So let's go to when you're 19. You're living with someone who cares about you. You start at community college, and my sense is you begin to realize you're smarter than you think.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I pretty much thought I was stupid. I needed eyeglasses, and I didn't have them, and I got eyeglasses. And I was just going to these tutoring sessions in the community building at Westchester Community College, and trying to learn to write an A and a W, and just doing that for a year. And then I took a kind of economics 101 class. And it was probably the first time in my life where I looked at something and I kind of just understood the charts and diagrams. I didn't think that, 3 years later I'd go to and graduate from one of the best schools in the world.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. But it was just, I put myself through a ringer, I will say too. I mean, there was probably a 2-year period where I didn't leave the house and I just practiced and read. And I practiced and practiced and practiced and read and read and read. And I almost feel like that pressure to get literate at such an old age, it felt like it was doing biological damage to my body.
But somehow it worked.
Yeah,
and it must have felt good to realize you're not stupid.
It did feel good to realize I was not stupid, but it was also, it was a pressure cooker, because I get into this Ivy League school and all the kids there, they're the smartest of the smartest that competed to get there.
Right.
And I'd kind of gotten in there in this like side door. Right. And I felt the pressure of the whole time of, can I do this? Am I good enough to do this? The first 6 weeks I was there, and I don't think I've ever said this publicly, I literally thought someone was going to come in to the dorm room or to a class, tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, we made a mistake.
Just kidding.
Yeah. And so that kind of brings us to, again, this is all very new to me in terms of me facing my recovery, right? I did this nervous system remediation. I was very nervous to do it. The only reason I did it is because I met Jay Faber, and he, who runs or works at the Amen Clinic in Encino, right, in Hollywood.
Yeah, he's
Hollywood.
great.
Yeah, and I asked him, I'd come across this and I'd asked him to vet it for me. And he gave me a way to look at it and see that it was safe and could be effective. And that led to a conversation with you, Daniel. And in that conversation, I kind of started to understand. And one of the things, and then I got really interested in your work, and then your work became a massive part of a book that I ended up writing with a scientist on the nervous system. And I remember being a little upset when I came across your work, because I was going to Fort Bragg. I'd been invited to Fort Bragg to teach them about communication. And I got interested in post-traumatic stress through my own trauma. And I wanted to do this book on the nervous system, and that every soldier I was coming across had traumatic brain injury, or they had brain toxicity from drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
And I thought it's not responsible for me to address this without having brain health be a massive component. But it also gave me the first insight into my own understanding of survival. And that's maybe a key reason why I'm here. And so the doctrine that we've studied as kids frowned upon drugs and alcohol. Now, that didn't stop a lot of my friends. It didn't stop 2 of my brothers. who had issues, one of whom became a major addict, and a lot of the kids I grew up with, because they're just trying to manage their nervous system.
That's crazy. You lived in crazy.
But when I met you that time, I was terrified of it. I'm growing up in inner city LA. So I'm not just dealing with this movement. I'm also dealing with the drug addiction, gang infested neighborhoods of Los Angeles. And a neighborhood they call Little Armenia now, but it was really Mexican, Filipino, Armenian. And I'm going to stay away from drugs and alcohol. I'm not going to touch a thing. Okay. And maybe I started having a beer at 16 if I went to a kegger or something, but I wouldn't go near THC. I wouldn't go near anything. And so when I started.
Why?
Because partly it was because the environment was too hostile. The movement was kind of pushing us against that, and the environment was too hostile. I saw what it was doing to my brother. I had an older brother, and I saw what him getting involved in that was doing to him. And I thought, if I'm going to survive this, I need to be clear-headed. And so
So you were smart.
I was, even though I didn't know it. But I do think a massive part of my recovery was that I had a healthy brain.
Mm-hmm. So
when I was in a position to start studying and improving my life, my brain was pristine.
Yeah.
Outside of the dietary issues.
So you had reserve.
Yeah,
I
think that if I had, and when I had that first conversation with you is when I realized how much the kind of almost accident of having a healthy brain saved my life. And it's been just this incredible journey. You know, I just, 8 days, I've been on the road for 2 weeks. 8 days ago, I was in Yerevan, Armenia as a guest of state, presenting on brain health and nervous system remediation in terms of trauma, which they'd never heard of before. And I presented to the Ministries of Health, the Ministries of Social Reform, and gave a lecture at Russian Armenian University with a bunch of PhD students and grad students, as well as psychiatrists. And the only reason I ended up being invited to Armenia to present on mental wellness and trauma being a biological injury or needing biological remediation is because of Amen Clinic. There was a high-level bureaucrat there that had a sick 6-year-old that just wouldn't get better. But this woman had means. So she took her child to Germany. A German doctor was doing everything to help this kid and said, I think we need to go to the Amen Clinic in New York. Brought this kid 2 years ago to the Amen Clinic in New York. Whatever scan and evaluation occurred there, that kid started to recover. And he's a normal kid. He's right at normal today. That this woman was so moved by that. I got a message one day saying, hey, can you recommend a doctor to come here and teach SGB, which is a nervous system remediation, but also affects brain health. And so it was you and your work that led me to being invited to Armenia. And it was incredible. I was talking about trauma as a biological injury, and they'd never heard of it before.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
I love that so much. Yeah. So talk about...
They want to open an Amen Clinic in Yerevan, Armenia, by the way. They told me to talk to you about that.
Yeah, no, we get invitations from all over the world.
Yeah.
So trauma recovery. I mean, it just sounds like there's so much. I mean, if you got to know Tana's story.
It's not nearly as crazy as yours. I thought mine was a really crazy story. I feel normal.
Her ACE score is 8.
Wow.
But you don't even qualify almost to have an ACE score because it was so unique.
I always, the ACEs score has bugged me because it hasn't had, you're born and raised in a cultic environment.
Right. It's like, wait, what?
Born and raised to be taught that you're a trillion-year-old fallen god in a prison planet in a meat body.
Right. No human emotion.
Yeah. It's not on the ACEs test. Yeah.
No.
So maybe we can do something about
that. That is just hysterical.
You don't qualify. Sorry.
What if the key to overcoming your pain isn't just in your body, but in your brain? My new book, Change Your Brain, Change Your Pain, offers strategies I've used with thousands of patients to break free from physical and emotional pain and reclaim focus, energy, and peace. Healing is possible, and it starts with your brain. Pre-order my new book now and receive special bonus gifts at changeyourbrain.changeyourpainbook.com. So trauma recovery is so important, but how did trauma manifest in you? Because you graduate from the London School of Economics, you actually become very successful. What did trauma look like in your life?
Shame. A kind I can't describe. Like I felt like it was cellular. And I think that that's part of, but an anxiety so hard, so turned up, and so deep that it felt like a limb. I did not know what anxiety. I just didn't know what it felt like. And so as I started to get successful, as things, really picked up, I don't know, 10 years ago or something, I was getting more miserable. I would achieve this incredible thing that I dreamed about my whole life. Last week I was in New York at a prominent museum presenting my artwork, my new graphic novel on a projected screen with music in Midtown. And it was just, I get to do the most incredible things. And as I was getting opportunities with my art and with the books that I was interested in, it was something would be about to come out, or I would sign a deal and I would be miserable and just thinking about all the things that could go wrong. So I was getting less happy with, I thought this was the equation in my mind. If poverty is illiteracy, if illiteracy and poverty are pain, then education and means or affluence are joy. And so I was miserable. And so I thought, this is one of the reasons I worked this hard. And now I'm really in trouble because I'm getting this and I'm really not feeling good. I'm feeling, maybe a sense of doom. And so that was kind of where it started going, okay, something's wrong here. And I went to therapy for the first time.
And then what happened?
I got diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress, to which I laughed at the therapist saying, what are you talking about? That's how much I'd been indoctrinated. I didn't know I'd been traumatized. And then...
Yeah, there's a new term I like too. It's called persistent stress disorder.
Okay.
PSD.
Okay.
Which clearly you had as a child.
Yeah. Yeah. So I shared a literary agent with a woman that had a psychologist, a Harvard psychologist that had been at TAPS for 15 years. She started to work on this nervous system treatment. And so I went in the middle of COVID and braved this treatment because Dr. Jay Faber helped me vet it. And I did this thing and the anxiety went away. The memory.
So what do they do? What is the treatment?
And they inject a small amount of local anesthetic. I think
like lidocaine?
Bupivacaine or ropivacaine. Yeah. The same thing that goes into an epidural.
Okay.
Because it wears off fast. And they basically turn off the sympathetic nervous system, which is on each side of your neck in the select ganglion nerve cluster. And when it turns back on 20 minutes later, it breaks the fight or flight feedback loop.
Really?
We could talk more about the brain chemistry of it, and Daniel could correct me, but the military's been using it for 20 years.
Really?
Yeah. And so it was my going to Fort Bragg and seeing what guys were getting out of it there. I couldn't believe it wasn't in the mainstream. So I met the doctor who discovered it 20 years ago, asked me to dinner, and I wanted this to be in the mainstream with CEOs, kindergarten teachers, yoga instructors, whoever. So I wrote a book with him to bring it into the mainstream. And that is when I came across Daniel's work and brain health. And one of the things that Jay Faber found when he was analyzing, we scanned a bunch of soldiers at Amen Clinic in Chicago, treated them on this treatment over 2 days, and scanned them again. And it really is not just a nervous system remediation. It is a brain health remediation. What Jay saw on the majority of those scans was massive increased blood flow to the frontal cortex in just a couple of days. Yeah. But so that became that's where I became aware of brain health. And I started to think, oh my gosh, brain health saved my life. And so I'm now a believer in it. And you just wouldn't believe. I was, in Armenia at their most prestigious museum of manuscripts. And I mean, it was like a UN meeting with these translators and this group of physicians and the ministers in the front row. And I'm sitting there saying, mental wellness, your trauma is biological. And this is how we're starting to view it in the United States. And this is how you need to start doing it.
So after the treatment, did the limb go away?
After the treatment, that thing of where it was just constantly there, it evaporated.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, it completely evaporated.
Don't get any ideas. You're not going to stick me in the middle of the night in my neck. Like, no jabs.
It evaporated, and
it's a pretty easy procedure.
Oh, it's
right?
been around.
No,
it's been around since 1925. It was developed for tingling hands, and this doctor in the late 90s started experimenting with it. On it, ironically, he was experimenting with this 100-year-old shot, now 100 years old, on tingling hands, hot flashes. He was experimenting on women going through menopause to see if he could treat hot flashes with this treatment from 75 years ago. And he was moving it around in terms of the placement. And these women who were menopause patients started saying, hey, my anxiety's gone. My post-traumatic stress is gone. And then he went down a rabbit hole and then first published on it in 2006. This is Dr. Eugene Lipov.
That's wild.
Yeah. So what I think it's great for is when there's people, so I've been referring so many people to Amen Clinic the last 4 years. But when you have people that it's something you can do right up front for someone that's really in bad shape to give them that edge to be able to pursue brain health. So what I'll typically do, because a lot of the people I meet have brain toxicity from drugs and alcohol, is I'll send them to do what we call the dual sympathetic reset, and then instantly send them to the Amen Clinic to get on a brain health program. And that's
so interesting.
Yeah.
Because if you have that limb of anxiety, of shame, of trauma, it's hard to do the right thing.
It's so interesting
because
how
you're always fussing or medicating.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting to me how kids who grow up in trauma, like the one thing that I hear consistently, and I had myself, is shame. It's not your fault. It wasn't my fault. But it's that is just the consistent theme.
It's only the last 2 years that I've been able to start to see that and transfer it to the people that did it to me where it belongs.
Right.
Yeah.
It's so interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. And really, ultimately, I mean, there's two reasons I'm here. One is because thank you for your work so I can understand what's going on inside me and that I'm not crazy. I mean, one of the things I was explaining to them in relation to your work in Armenia, I mean, I was talking about this. The first place I went, I was invited by the most prominent psychiatrist in Armenia, an old woman in her mid to late 80s to present to her doctors. And the reason she's the most prominent psychiatrist in Armenia is because when she was young, she ran the largest psychiatric facility in the USSR. And so she's the most respected psychiatrist in the country. She was loving it and wanting us to give this information to their psychologists and their doctors. But, and then there's the other part that you're talking about, Tana, which is, I overcame something that I shouldn't have been able to overcome. And that has its own feelings to it, almost like surviving a war.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's exactly what it's like.
Yeah. I mean, my friends, I have close friends now in special forces, and they say that to me, that, what you've been through is not different. But I've lost so many. And so the humanist part of my story, like why I wrote the book Child X, which I'm still processing. I was living in secret, not telling anyone about this, not telling my agents, not telling my publishers, just so much shame. I cannot describe, I don't even know what's a word for shame times 1,000, right? Just total
self-hatred almost.
Yeah. In terms of having been embarrassed by ever being involved in this thing, and what they did to me, and the thought of how vulnerable I was for so long. And so the reason I wrote Child X and why I want people to read that book is everybody asks me, is I want people to know that you can be in the darkest reaches of impossibility to come back and still come back.
Mm-hmm.
And that is my mission. As a writer, and one of the themes in my art.
I love that.
So as opposed to post-traumatic stress, you're flipping it into post-traumatic growth. And I love that so much.
Yeah, because you turned your pain into purpose.
Just for people who are watching, guilt is I feel bad about something I did. Shame is I feel bad about who I am.
Right. And I love this acronym. Shame is self-hatred at my expense. It's not, it hurts you. It's not hurting other people. It's misplaced.
Yeah. And I think the work that you do is a huge part of lifting that shame in this way. When you look at mental wellness, I mean, I'm saying things to the two people that know this better than anyone on the planet, right? But when you look at mental wellness as a physiological thing that can be remediated, that can be treated physiologically without masking it necessarily with pharmacological drugs, but actually something that you can make better through brain health and through treating the nervous system, you lift the stigma of not only did I have to live through that, and when I first go to therapy, I'm told I have a disorder. And all these guys coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, when I first started going to Fort Bragg, these guys are broken. Yeah, they're told, and they're really nervous about it because they think it's going to affect their ability to retire. Right. They think it's going to affect their ability to get a job when they get out. They're all being told they have a disorder. And it's really inhumane, and it's really sickening, because that's one of the reasons we continue to hold on to the shame, is because we're told we're crazy after we survive it. So with the work that you guys do, when you say, hey, no, this is biological, this is brain health, you can make your brain healthy again. Now, and we can treat the nervous system. That stigma.
And it's also not you, it's what happened to you.
Yeah, if you say you have post-traumatic, you wouldn't say to someone you have broken leg disorder. Right? Because you can see the broken leg, because you can't see the brain. And this is what you said in our first conversation, that you can scan the brain, that when you first started, you thought it was inhumane, that when something with anything else breaks and hurts, we x-ray, except when someone starts to act a little weird or crazy. So if people don't understand that it's brain health, even this nervous system treatment, it's a brain health treatment.
It's a brain health treatment.
Yeah, because it shuts off.
You're interrupting the feedback loop, just
between
like
the
you said.
amygdala and the nervous system, right? So, and it is then, if I think I have a disorder, I'm going to carry that shame till I die.
Oh, for sure.
But if I start to understand it as a biological injury, like a broken leg you can't see, then I'm going into I'm just a guy that broke his leg.
And how do I heal it?
Yeah. And so it's crucial for recovery that people understand that they have a biological injury if their brain is
affected.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I often say I don't take broken people and put them back together. I take awesome people, help them be more awesome.
Awesomer.
Because they have a healthier brain, right? And I think imaging it changed everything for me. It's stop calling people mental. Like, nobody wants it.
Or a disorder. I mean, is that something that you think a lot about in your work? That you're removing a stigma that is destroying people?
Yeah.
That's
and
why.
Like when I first heard the term mental illness, so I became a psychiatrist because my first wife tried to kill herself. And I took her to see a wonderful psychiatrist. And I'm like, oh, if he helps her, it won't just help her. It'll help me. It'll help our children. It'll help our grandchildren. But I hated the term mental illness. It shames people. It's
that's why no one wants to go to a psychiatrist.
And it's wrong. And, but when you think of it as brain health, well, everybody wants a better brain, right? Everybody wants a better brain. Nobody wants a mental illness. So I'm like, oh, we have a marketing problem. This is like, and you wrote The Iconist, right? And you were talking about
how to make ideas stick and stand out. It was when Dr. Faber read that book that he contacted me. And I was at this turning point of misery where I had been diagnosed with 2019. I'd been diagnosed, he contacted me, and I'd been diagnosed 6 years ago with post-traumatic stress disorder. And I was reeling that now, after all that, I was crazy. And so, it's unbelievable. When I was in Armenia presenting on brain health and the improvement of symptomatic improvements, they were looking at me. There are I'm sure there were some that didn't like it, but there were half dozen psychiatrists and a lot of psychologists and doctors. And it was like I was bringing them fire, because this is a country that has been through so much. They had a genocide in 2017. And then just 3 years ago, they lost one of their most major territories called Karabakh. 90% of their veterans are under 21 after just losing this war 3 years ago. So this is a traumatized country. And what I find is the more traumatized the environment, when I try to explain biological remediation of trauma or trauma as an injury, the more traumatized the environment, the more they instantly get it. Yeah. They see it. The minute you start to explain, you start to get into the symptoms of it.
Do you mind if I ask you, when you left the environment you were in?
Scientology.
When you left Scientology, I'm actually afraid to say it. I'm afraid to say it.
No, that word, just saying that word for years, like just the word or hearing it, I was saying it, I would get.
Was there an indoctrination towards psychiatrists?
Yes, there's a mass. From the time I was 3 or 4 years old, I was taught that in the history of not just this universe, going back 1 billion or trillion years, which is older than the universe, so that's not even possible, that the reason for all evil in the history of the universe is the psychiatrist.
So there were psychiatrists billions of years ago.
Yeah, and maybe they had different names, but they're just being reincarnated over 1 billion years, and that they're the reason behind the Holocaust. They're the reason behind Jim Crow. Any humanistic disaster. So then you get out, you can't get help.
Interesting.
So when I was in the Army.
But I want to go back to the question.
When I was in the Army, and I'm a child psychiatrist, I'm a board certified child psychiatrist. I used to drive from Fort Irwin, which is in the middle of the Mojave Desert, to Los Angeles. And I would see these big semi trucks. And on the side, it said, "Psychiatry kills children." And then they had a number to call. And it used to make me so angry.
Did you ever call it?
I didn't, but they demonstrated outside of the American Psychiatric Association's annual meeting. And
was it Scientology?
It was Scientology.
Oh, I see. Okay. I was wondering where you're going with that.
Kill children. And I was just so offended and horrified by it. But I'm not a huge fan of psychiatrists.
That's
because not me, but they make diagnoses based on symptom clusters with no biological data. It's like, and they call me crazy. I was like, I'm not crazy. I took the MMPI and I'm boringly normal. The system is crazy, but their answer is not the right answer, right? Joining a cult is not the right answer. The right answer is brain health.
Yeah.
I agree. And it was funny when Dr. Faber first reached out to me 6 years ago, and he told me he was a psychiatrist because you're indoctrinated from a child, you grow up in it. I literally got shivers of, ugh.
Well, it's okay, because I almost canceled my first date with him when he told me he was a psychiatrist. So
I got shivers but what was so incredible, again, back to this trip to Armenia, is how many psychiatrists were at these lectures. And then when they were in the audience, I was like, well, these aren't Daniel Amen psychiatrists. These are psychiatrists like you just described. They're diagnosing off of symptoms. And one of them, when I was lecturing at Armenian University, she said, we have drugs.
You're right.
And I said, yeah, that masks the problem. And I'm not saying there's never necessary for drugs, but why would you mask the problem when you can remediate when you can make the brain healthy,
So why would you go to Xanax or any of the benzos if injecting an anesthetic into the stellate ganglion could potentially interrupt it? And let's just say it works 25% of the time.
It works 85 to 95.
Okay, but let's just say it works 25% of the time.
Why wouldn't you try that first?
Why would you give someone a potentially addictive drug that once you start it, they're not going to stop it? And now we know increases the risk of dementia before we do something simple. It's insane what's happening in our society. Did you know 27% of all doctor visits, all kinds of doctors, OBGYNs, internists, nephrologists, somebody's getting a benzo. And it's the insanity that we live with.
This is another part of it. When I started sending lots of people for treatment, working with Fort Bragg, I thought that all the studies were saying the Navy has studied this. There's been a lot of peer-reviewed studies. But one of the things is it's 85 to 90% effective in these extreme post-traumatic stress trauma symptoms, which are a lot of the symptoms of mental health that we're all dealing with. The 10 to 15% where I send people and it doesn't work, I've seen they always have one thing in common. And this is why I got so interested in brain health. They have poor brain health. When it doesn't work, they have severe TBI or severe toxicity of the brain through drugs and alcohol. 1 for 1. And so that's why I have become a believer in this. It's not enough to treat the nervous system if you don't remediate or find a way to make the brain healthy. It just doesn't work. Yeah.
So I need to go back to this question because I'm just fascinated.
Sure.
I have to know. When you left Scientology, I'll say the word, did you get a lot of pushback? Were you afraid?
I'm afraid right now. I'm afraid. Yeah. I mean,
because they don't just let people
No,
leave.
they have a policy. They will declare me what they call a suppressive person, which is like a fatwa, where they will put their secret police after me. There's been a program written to destroy my life. That's for sure by their Office of Special Affairs. Every Scientologist, or if you want to call it so-called Scientologist, I don't even believe it's a thing, has the right to harm me in some way, my career, in some way. There was an article on me in the Daily Mail about 6 weeks ago where they reached out to the local Scientology, and what they got back was a declaration from my mother saying with some denials, I haven't talked to her in 20 years just because I don't know her. And she's still part of it. And one of the things she said in there was, he didn't sign his first billion-year contract when he was 5. He did it when he was 7, and it was adorable. And, just the things that occurred in that building. One of the things, if you did something wrong in that building, they would do public beatings where they would strip the kid, they would do an order and make the parents strip the kid down. And they called it a public spanking, but it was basically a public beating because the kid's moving around in front of all of us other kids. That was really heavy because it was so outrageous when you're 4 or 5 years old to see this on a stage or a raise in front of you that we laughed. We just rejected it. We just couldn't. And that's the only context we had for our lives. So there was a lot of things that occurred in this building that I would call animalization. What I said to the skeptical psychiatrist when I was doing a lecture to these PhD students and grad students at Russian, a prominent university, at Russian Armenian University on brain health. One of the things she said, a woman asked a question and said, we have drugs for this. And I said, what do you do? And she said, I'm a psychiatrist. And she was a professor there. And I just gave this example of an animal. I said, take an animal. I got this from Frank Ochberg's book, a chapter on biology and aggression from the 70s, okay? Where they say, we know trauma is biological. Because if you take an animal and you spend a day torturing it,
right,
and then you put it up in the Ritz-Carlton for the rest of its life, it's never going to be the same. It's going to be aggressive, fight, or fearful and timid, flight. we didn't just give that animal a disorder. We changed its biology. And
you actually changed the animal's genes. And so the children and the grandchildren are going to be affected.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Child X, Jamie Mustard. What a great interview.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me because you've been an inspiration. So it feels like a perfect circle.
So interesting. You're so brave
We are so
to talk
excited
about this.
to support. I actually, you sent me Hybrid, and I got to read part of it, and it was so interesting. It was.
I have an advanced copy for you if you want.
One of my first graphic novels that I read, and I could actually sort of sense the terror in the beginning of the book.
That book is a sci-fi alternate reality version of Child X. Right. So I was never going to write Child X. I wrote that book before Child X. And then my agent sold it after I agreed to write this Child X book. So I thought, so that was that. Yeah. So thank you very much. And I was just at the Society of Illustrators last week, projecting it on a large screen with music in New York a few days ago. So I'm really proud of that.
So what's next for you? What do you want to do?
What I want to do for the next year is promote Child X. I really am in this thing where, when you survive something that you shouldn't survive and you've lost so many people and you're constantly asking yourself that question, why do you survive? Mm-hmm. And I think, I don't feel like I'm a very altruistic person. I don't feel like I'm a person that is a do-gooder. The books, the books that I've written, the kid's book about resilience, or The Invisible Machine on the Biology of Trauma, which includes a lot of your work in it. I didn't write those things because I was trying to necessarily do good. I was writing those things because I was so fascinated that this information wasn't out there in more mainstream ways that I felt compelled to do it, because it takes 2 to 3 years to write one of these things. So I typically am motivated by, can I spend 2 to 3 years on this? So back to Child X and Hybrid. I've just looked at my survival, and I thought, how did I survive this? Why did I survive this? And it's kind of like being in World War I and your buddies get shot next to you, and your other buddy gets shot next to you, and then your own helmet rattles, and you pull it off, and there's a hole right through the middle. And then you start touching yourself and nothing's wrong. And then living. That's kind of what my life has been like. And I think that you have to make an existential choice as to why you survive something like that. And for me, it is to speak for the people that aren't around to speak, or the people that are too broken. Because so many of the kids I grew up with have autoimmune. They have fibromyalgia. They have all sorts of autoimmune just from the stress of their childhoods. So I've given myself a reason to do it. And I really do think, not just that Child X is kind of a roadmap. If you've been through something extreme, how did I do it? And I couldn't tell the whole story of how I did it in this interview. How do you overcome illiteracy at 20 years old and then go to an Ivy League school? Well, there's a way that I did that. There was an outlook that I had to do that. And so I want to give people, as I said, probably at the beginning, I want to give people the gift of maybe seeing how someone else did it in such an extreme way, so that maybe they can help someone they know, or do it for themselves.
Because I'd never once heard you say, oh, well, my childhood was normal.
Compared to what I just heard?
Yeah. So I'm promoting that. I have artwork coming out, but mostly I just I want to put that message out there for the next year.
Well, we often say taking pain and putting it into purpose. Pain shared is pain divided.
Or Viktor Frankl says in Man's Search for Meaning, you can tolerate any what if there's a reason why.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite books.
Yeah. And so I've just tried to give myself, I never saw, until I started looking at your work, I don't think I ever understood what happened to me. And so now, it was a few years after coming across brain health and the work of Amen clinics that I started to understand it. And that all this stuff that I'd been given as a kid was bullshit. And that people are walking around with a biological problem. And,
And psychiatrists did not cause the Holocaust.
Did you ever have the feeling it's okay to be mad?
Yeah, I mean, I have mixed feelings on that. I've gone through stages for sure. I mean, I think that anger,
Sort of right. You're not like lingering anger,
Well,
but like
let-
righteous indignation.
I'm getting there for sure. I mean, coming on here is an act of massive righteous indignation.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of who you guys are, what you represent, how they will take it. Yeah, and they've already started to, contact people that I know, and they've already made motions against me. But there comes a time in life where you have to stand up for what you believe in.
I have a new book coming out in December called Change Your Brain, Change Your Pain. And I actually talk about repressed rage. And I don't know if you've read John Sarno's books on pain, physical and emotional pain, and how it's often repressed rage.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I read that, I'm like, well, how do you help
They're
people
connected.
get the rage out? And there's a fascinating form of psychotherapy called interpersonal dynamic, short-term,
IFS?
short-term dynamic, ISTDP,
Okay.
intensive short-term dynamic psychotherapy. So interesting. And it's basically a rage therapy that when you learn appropriately how to express it, you hurt less.
And I do
both
rage journaling.
physically and emotionally. And in the new book, I talk about the doom loop, that something triggers the pain. And it might be a memory. It might be a disappointment from someone else. It might be.
Can I ask you a
dairy.
question as a psychiatrist? Is it healthy to be rageful?
It's healthy to get it out.
Not
Okay.
rageful.
Okay.
But it's healthy to
Rage
be
empty.
able.
Rage empty.
It's helpful to be able to express it.
Yeah, getting it out is critical.
And probably some of your art, it might be there.
I think hybrid is an act of rage. If people read that, they would probably see it as an act of rage.
So holding it in, so let me see if I can explain it.
Denying it is another
and I'd
problem.
be interested in your thought in this. When children are little, they see themselves at the center of the universe. And if something good happens, they sort of think it's because of them. If something bad happens, they think it's because of them. So if something
where shame
bad
happens.
happens, a lot of bad things happen to you. They feel rage, they feel anger, but they can't express it, because if they express it, they get beaten, like you showed. Or if they express it, the people who help them survive,
Adults.
typically,
You're Stockholm. You're
typically
psychologically
their
crushed.
mom or dad.
Yeah.
It's like, well, no, I can't express it to them because then I'll be abandoned and then I'll die. So they then feel guilt about the rage, and they live with this shame, always feeling like they did something wrong, even though they didn't. But they turn it inward. And I have found when I help people get in touch with it and express it appropriately, and I often do it with EMDR, so I like this combination of go into that. And what would you do with those feelings if you could? And often it'll come out in rage. It just helps them so
Goes
much,
away.
helps their nervous system calm down because they're not constantly bottling.
What
the
you resist persists. So if you can just let it out in an appropriate way. So I rage journal, and then like these are the things that I don't want anyone to see, right? So you burn it, shred it, whatever. You rage journal, and then I can really focus on my prayer and my meditation and the things that are important to me and feeling grateful. But when you have that in the back of you, it's always that noise, that white noise in the back of your head. It's really hard to like feel gratitude and have it stick.
So when I figured this out, because Tana would describe me as Pollyanna, I'm
sure.
like Pollyanna's brother.
For sure.
You know, I love that movie. And why do I love the movie?
No, he wants to watch it over and over
She
and
taught
over.
people to play the glad game. Whatever situation you're in, what is there to be glad about? And when we look at your situation, which was horrific, well, the thing to be glad about is, well, you survived and then you thrived. What's that? I mean, that's so interesting, right? To look at resilience. But then as I'm learning John Sarno's work, I'm like, oh no. And I remember I'm in a parking lot with her and I'm like, Pollyanna needs to meet Hannibal Lecter.
I'm like,
Wow.
what?
I'm like,
That's a little extreme.
It's like they need to figure out how to be friends. And
Yeah, I mean, anger is a force that can move things. Part of my indoctrination, part of one of the most major, massive pieces in the indoctrination of Scientology is that anything bad that ever happens to you, you pulled it in.
Oh, so it's your fault.
Yeah. So if anything bad happens, you karmically did something before in a previous life or in this life to cause that bad thing to happen to you. That's a very...
Well, that's where your shame comes from.
Yeah. So that just made it harder and harder to get out. My older brother was angry. He was lashing out. I took the other road. When I was younger, it was kind of like, let me keep my head down and people please, because
it was survival.
Yeah.
For you.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, maybe
And
after this,
I would have taken your road, but then later I'd have figured out how to get the anger out for sure. Or otherwise, it just always eats away at you.
So when I learned how to do this, it's like, oh, it's not about being rageful. It's actually about being rage empty, right? It's about getting it out. And it's like, okay, that was appropriate. I got it out in a healthy way. I didn't hurt anyone. I didn't yell at anyone. I didn't abuse anyone. I actually got those feelings out, and I can actually question some of them. Some of them probably aren't even that accurate, but I can now shred that, focus on gratitude.
Well, I'm going to leave here really pissed off. You guys are giving me a reason. I do think that is, that I probably should be more angry, and I probably am more than I admit to myself. What I don't want to do is to act in a way that's going to discredit what I'm saying, because it's so outrageous what happened to me. It's so hard to believe for people that I feel that if I add too much emotional twang to it, so maybe I need a rage journal.
Do this by yourself.
Okay. Yeah.
Do it by yourself.
Or with an ISTDP therapist.
Or a therapist.
Okay.
They're so
ISTDP.
helpful.
Okay.
And so the stellate ganglion block really could calm the nervous system. But if there's still a lot of rage, well, it sort of builds up and comes back, especially when you get triggered. So just learning systematically to get it out. I talk about
it's like cleaning your house.
Thing I love called emotional freedom journaling.
Mm-hmm.
It's take each 5 years of your life. And so I'm 71, so that's what, 14 pages. So 14 pages, 0 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 15, and so on. So you just get a page, draw a line down the middle of the page, and on the left side, what awesome things happened. And on the right side, what awful things happened. And you do it, and if you do it for you, it's like maybe 10 pages, you begin to go, oh, these are the things I'm really pissed off about.
What do you call that?
Emotional freedom journaling. And then for rage journaling, like you write it out and get it out.
And this is the stuff, it's actually hard to do at first because most people are good people. They're goodists. And so they have a hard time actually getting in touch with that. But if you can actually get in touch with the things that are in your head that you would never say out loud, that you don't want anyone to know, that you would never want anyone to know that you ever thought, right? Like these are like those things. You have to, like when I first started writing it, I'm like looking over my shoulder, like, okay, someone's going to find out. But once you get used to doing it, it's like someone popped a boil. It's just this relief. And then it's like, I would shred it or burn it or whatever, just get rid of it. No one needs to see it. That's just my thing that I do to get it out. And it's just, now it's like cleaning my house, right? I just keep it clean.
I think the writing the book did that in a lot of ways. I mean, I remember when Glenn Yeffeth asked me if I could write a book about my experience, I said, I don't think I could. And he said, why? And I said, I don't think anybody would want to read a book about a child being strangled for 300 pages. A kitten being strangled for 300 pages is what I said. But, what's so, that's an interesting slip there, but what's so interesting about that is that one of the moments in the book that I put in there that I'm really ashamed of, that I was ashamed of for a long time. So I put it in the book is when I was at this place across from the Big Blue Building with total, just slowly eroding with my mind not getting full and having to, doing child labor and just living under just the most less than developing country living conditions in the United States of America. There was a basement where I would go down into the basement because no one could ever see me get upset because then I would be in trouble. I'd be sent to ethics for correction, literally. I would go into this basement and scream where no one could hear me. And the repetitive thought that I had in my head was, and I put this in the book because I wanted people to know that I had this thought. I would wish that my parents died in a car accident. And that way I would be suffering for a reason. Mm. And I carried a lot of shame that I carried that thought.
And I would teach you, it's just a thought.
It's a thought.
And just because you have a thought has nothing to do with whether or not it's true. You're trying to make sense of
something that didn't make sense.
Repetitive trauma, right? And so I love the work of Byron Katie. So I would wish my parents had died in an accident. Okay, is that true? Yeah, maybe. Is it absolutely true? No. How does that make me feel? Awful. How would I feel if I didn't have that thought? Fine. And then you just flip it to the opposite and you meditate on that. But learning to take each thought captive is so important. But there's nowhere in school we teach kids to manage their minds. Instead, they get a thought. I'm a pedophile. I'm not. They get that thought and they go, oh my God, you must be a pedophile because you had that thought. You should die. And it's like, no, it's just a thought. It's just a random thought that has nothing to do with whether or not it's true, right? We have to manage our mind. And that's why in the emotional freedom journaling, there's the awesome, it's like, because even though it was chronic stress, you probably have fun memories in each of those periods, whether it's playing with someone else or having a discussion or something.
There's lots of moments of, angels that came in and saved my life on the brink, and lots of moments of joy that you find ways as a child.
And
right?
most therapists, they focus on the awful. And I'm like, no, you have to focus on both because otherwise therapy makes you worse. Makes sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I have a question for you. So going through a gauntlet like that for 20 years, where it was just nonstop crush. I mean, the psychological torment is hard to describe. And as well as the physical pressure and the physical abuse, which was intermittent. What does that do to your brain? What did that do to my brain?
It's a really interesting question. And because you were able to come back from it. So the chronic stress, clearly bad for the brain. And what it does is it activates your emotional brain. So I've actually published research on the diamond pattern. It's your emotional structures are busier, but your hippocampus actually becomes smaller because chronic exposure to cortisol damages cells in the learning and memory centers of the brain. And so under that chronic stress, it would have been harder for you to learn. But when you get out of it, the hippocampus actually throughout the rest of your life, make 700 new baby stem cells every day.
So can you restore your hippocampus to normal?
So you can restore it to normal, depends on how damaged it is. But you weren't smoking pot. You weren't drinking, right? So you ameliorated some of the trauma by not escalating the poison, right? Cortisol, chronic exposure to cortisol is poisonous to your brain. You didn't add alcohol and marijuana and cocaine and methamphetamines on top of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, this was so interesting. And I hope everybody gets Child X. Jamie Mustard, thank you so much. How can people learn more about your work or connect with you?
Follow me on Instagram and send me a message on Instagram.
Is it just at Jamie Mustard?
It's at JAMIE _mustard, MUSTARD, believe it or not. At Jamie _mustard. And I respond to everyone. It was an Instagram message from a doctor in Germany that got me invited by the state of Armenia because of the work of the Amen Clinic. So I respond to everyone. It's a trauma zone. So I always make sure that I talk to everyone.
I've seen it over and over again. When people change their brain, they change their life. As a psychiatrist and neuroscientist, I've studied more than 260,000 brain scans. And what I've learned is this: most people are struggling with a brain that's not working as well as it could, and they don't even know it. That's why I created our app, Brain Fit Life 5.0, to give you the same tools I use with my patients every day. Tools that can help you feel calmer, more focused, and more in control of your habits. One person told us, "This is the first time I felt like myself in years." You can try it for free and see what a better brain can do for you.
You've been listening to Change Your Brain every day. Jamie is changing his in a positive way every day. Leave us a comment, question, review, subscribe. We are here for you.